The other thing we can talk about is they just launched that campaign, which is quite creative. I don't know if you saw some of the stuff, hijacking people's billboards.
The billboards, yeah. No, we have to talk about that.
Yeah,
Cool.
just maybe, Calvin, was that like did you have to plan with each of those people that you were going to do that? And how did you even do that?
It's a bit of both, right? We chose brands that had a sense of humor, one, and we felt that we're like proudly South African. So that was step one, because look, South Africa, I mean, I love South Africans in general, right? But you get your one or two that we knew were just not going to have a sense of humor. So we left it to like the last second and then told them. And it was so cool. Like the reaction was, it was exactly what we'd hoped for, right? That's why we chose the right brand. We had literally one brand who lost their shit and we had to take it down and we just replaced the billboard. So it was that kind of nonsense. So no, it was really great. I must admit, it was planned meticulously with a lot of thought, and it's worked out even better than we'd hoped.
I love the Fuff the Clark one. Let's hang out.
The guys had so much fun putting those things together.
The Rassie one is the one in Stellenbosch. I also enjoyed it. So, hey, coach, give us a chance.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 9 Fuffies and 9 Rassies. So we've got 47 billboards in total. So all around the country.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
Welcome, builders, to How Would You Build It? The podcast that dives deep into the dynamic world of startups and product creation right here in South Africa and Africa. This show is more than just interviews. Every week, we sit down with the brilliant minds to provide a masterclass for building digital products amidst the challenges and opportunities unique to our continent. From seasoned founders to dynamic product managers, we uncover the unique stories and strategies behind some of the most innovative digital products being built. So for all the aspiring founders and product builders out there, you'll discover that each episode is a wealth of practical wisdom and local and actionable insights. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to our podcasts and connect with us on social media for even more content. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome, builders, to another episode of How Would You Build It? It's episode 71, and I'm really excited because we've got quite a nice name here for us today. But before we get to him, Renier, my co-host, welcome. Good morning. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Bobby. Lekker to be here and excited to get into this. Quite an interesting topic and interesting industry.
Yeah. We just need to mention before we get in, another successful event, the Open Letter community this week. So pat on the back for us, I must say. That was a really great event. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. Yeah, a lot of fun. Yeah. Cool. And then Calvin from Melon Mobile. Very great to have you here. Welcome. And how are you doing this morning?
Right. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited about this session, actually.
Nice. You should be. Cool. So Calvin, for those of people out there, the audience that have not seen one of your famous billboards or haven't heard of Melon Mobile, can you just give us a very quick elevator pitch of what you guys are doing?
So we started in May 2023 with the very simple strategy to disrupt South African telco. And if you go back, telco in South Africa is 30 years old, and the technology has changed, right? So we've gone from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, etc. But the way you sign up, the way you interact with the mobile networks, etc., really hasn't changed. And we felt that we needed to actually move that in line with the technology shift. I mean, ultimately, the major technology shift has been in our devices, right? Which is enabled by the telcos and the mobile networks. But the way you interact with them and the way you sign up and the kind of products that you get from mobile networks just has not kept up with the same pace. So we launched in May 23, as I said, and we're completely digital. So you sign up on the app. It's a 6-minute sign-up process from start to finish. That includes RECA and activation of the SIM card. And then we've got the full ability then to run a mobile network. So it's your voice, it's your data, and your SMSs. And I think one of the first things we created, which, and we'll talk about it later in the podcast, is a build your own plan. And that really gives you the total flexibility, right? So how many voice minutes do you want? How much data do you want? How many SMSs do you want? And that's completely flexible, and it's month to month. So you can change it from 1 month to the next. The fascinating thing about that was that nobody knows what they use. So people actually wanted some default packages. So we've kind of gone and created default packages now until you've used us for a couple of months, and then you can move across. So these are the interesting things about disrupting an industry, is that you still got to keep on top of it, because even if you think it's a great idea, often your audience or the customer out there isn't actually doesn't have the knowledge or is not quite used to the sort of change of flexibility that you're offering. So really interesting.
Yeah. I think Rene, if there's any word, and he said it himself, Calvin said it himself, the word disrupt. I think that is literally what they're doing here, Rene.
Yeah, I mean, they're disrupting the billboard industry. So, but Calvin, I mean, from the outside, people look at it and respectfully, most people have no idea how mobile operators work, right? So they look at it, they go, oh, it's just a soften. But I think what I've identified, having looked into what you guys are doing, is there's this business end to end is so complicated. If you look at a Vodacom or MTN, I mean, on the front end side, you've got a customer service business. It needs to appeal to an end user, but at the back, you're quite heavy on infrastructure and technology and those things. And it's very hard to actually build a business that's good on both those fronts, because it's two fundamentally different businesses, which often means you need a different culture for the front end of the business, company culture, than for the engineering technical side. And I think that's where the opportunity lies, right? Some of these big guys, it's impossible to keep a customer-centric, all about customer culture when you have a hardcore engineering business that has to maintain towers and not disrupt status quo on the back. And I mean, that's really the benefit you guys have. You don't have to focus on the network part.
Yeah.
So maybe on that, comment on that, and maybe just explain how MVNO works, because I think a lot of people are not familiar with it.
Hey there, coffee lovers and crypto explorers. Are you looking for the perfect brew to start your day and fuel those crypto discussions? Well, let me introduce you to Crypto Coffee. Their medium roast Arabica beans offer a taste that's out of this world. It's the ideal blend to wake you up and keep you going through all your crypto adventures. Plus, Crypto Coffee makes a fantastic gift for that friend who can't stop talking about the latest blockchain trends and needs a little extra energy to keep the conversation going. So why not grab a bag today and enjoy a cup that's as rich and as exciting as your crypto journey. Crypto Coffee, where every sip fuels your passion for crypto.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Renee. I mean, the company culture in general is such an important thing. But let's go back to your first question. How does an MVNO work, right? So there's multiple versions of MVNOs. We've actually built an MVNE as well as an MVNO. So an MVNE ultimately is the enabler. So we've chosen the hardest way to get into an MVNO, but we did that on purpose because I felt that the existing MVNE platforms, so take a few steps back, you've typically got your MNO, which is your mobile network, which runs the infrastructure, the radio network, and the core. And then you have a platform for the MVNOs, which is called the MVNE platform, that then enables this, which that's the E for MVNE, and which enables the operators, which would be ourselves. But I found that when we launched, the existing MVNE platforms and operators out there just didn't match our needs and requirements, right? They were very traditional in their approach. So a lot of people ask me, but MVNOs in South Africa haven't really been successful on the face of it. I mean, you've got over 20 MVNOs. No one's really shot the lights out here. There's some which claim to have fairly high numbers, but what are the ARPU? What are the 30-day monthly active? What are the recharges? It's not very clear. My view on that is because the guys have gone in with a copy-paste offering of what you can get from the mobile networks. All right. Now the MVNOs, we're supposed to come and disrupt and put something different into the market, right? And what guys have done is kind of just put a different a lipstick on the same offering and drop the price. Now, that's a super lazy way of doing things. And in my view, it's not the way to win. All right. Price is a lever that you need to pull in the space, but it's not the lever. And ultimately, if that's what you're riding on, I think you're not going to win. So, when we entered into this, we said, look, we can't find a platform. So unfortunately, we're going to have to go out and get a platform, do the entire enablement portion, as well as the MVNO. So it's made this journey exponentially harder, but it's allowed us to have a fully customizable network and be able to get propositions, pricing, customer journeys, those kind of things out into the market a lot quicker than anybody else. And it's built to what we require, right? So I think as much as it's made the journey harder, in the long term, it's going to and it has simplified things, and it will continue to simplify the way we do things. So, we'll also be able to bring product and services to the market that in most other MVNO or even MNO space will take 12 to 18 months just to get the technology stack right. So, and back to your original point around the culture, I think you can do both cultures, right? And I think it's what you tend to find is that the customer centricity, and this isn't just a South African thing, this is a worldwide thing. Customer centricity in telco and mobile is just non-existent. I mean, if you look at NPS scores across the world, telco is consistently the lowest. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that, because look, you've got hundreds of millions of customers, tens of millions of customers in certain circumstances, and no one's really figured out how best to sort of service those customers. And in my view, it's because they haven't gone back and kind of said, how does a customer interact today versus 30 years ago? It's kind of just taken the same, call it recipe that's been working and hasn't been adapted. Whereas I guess we've got a little bit of hindsight that we can say, listen, let's build this thing from scratch. And I think one of the important points, most telcos have up to 400 to 500 different systems, okay, that make up the offering that you see. And that's what really creates the complexity, because you try and do a single change, you're cutting across hundreds of systems to make that change and to make sure there's consistency in that.
And is that because of the technology legacy? I mean, we started with 3G data bundles, and now you've got all of these different systems managing different things.
It's a combination of that. What I find so interesting is that, when I went out looking for a platform, I was really hoping to look for one vendor, buy it off the shelf, plug it in, and I'd have the entire ecosystem. Nowhere near the case, right? It's a separate OCF, a separate OSS, a separate BSS, a separate billing system. It's separate everything, right? So telco is very specialized, but that very specialized facet creates complexity, because now every single part of that, those puzzles need to be integrated. So it's a combination of legacy, 100%. And then I guess it's not phasing out of those legacy systems because the customer's attached or whatever else, and saying, listen, guys, there's a hard cut on these guys. We need to migrate them onto a different platform and get them across. So no, I think one thing is telco is super complex. And I think a lot of people underestimate the complexity if you're going to run a proper telco, and whether it be MVNO or whatever else. I think, we've already learned a couple of lessons. I mean, look, we came in with our eyes wide open, so we knew what we were looking for, but it's been interesting to see how hard it is to get even some of the incumbent vendors to deliver what we require as an MVNO, right? Which should, in my mind, just be an off-the-shelf offering that can be replicated multiple times, but it really isn't the case.
Can you share your story? Because I mean, there's the technology side of things, which I would love to dive into. I mean, your mobile app looks very slick, and I'm loving to play around there a little bit more. But the legal frameworks that you must have had to deal with in what you just call the legacy sort of industry, I can only imagine from a high level what a nightmare that must have been. Can you share any insights there?
Yeah, I mean, I think naively, and this was one of the benefits of being an entrepreneur, right? Is we have the positivity on our side, so and naivety at the same time. So I went out looking for the platform. I was saying, a single platform, buy it off the shelf and let's implement it. And the more I got into it, I just realized, geez, this is going to be a lot harder, and we're going to spend a lot more money than I planned. So I actually eventually ended up with one of the really, really big telco platform providers, against my better judgment, because everyone was like, don't go near them. They are terribly expensive. The entry level systems start at $10 million. So there's no point even having the conversation. I was like, fair enough. But I thought, as part of my due diligence, I've got to speak to everyone. And I kind of pitched my vision. They were like, well, look at this. And they brought up this presentation of what they had or were building, right? At the time, it had was with their words. And they went through these slides. I was like, wow, our vision matches this amazing platform. Why haven't I heard of it? After 2-3 months of up and down, we realized that they built absolutely nothing of this. It was pure slideware. And but being the largest telco provider, I kind of took a bet on it, if you want to call it that, a calculated bet with them, and we agreed to partner in building this. So it was a really cool story, because we actually got to be super, super involved in the building of this platform and the integration into this platform. And, we're their first customer and have been for the first, just 2.5 years. They've now got additional customers on board, which is great, because now we're starting to see the benefits of the fast side of a platform like this, because functionality that, we didn't really need at the time is suddenly just being pushed into the ecosystem. But, it was a very interesting journey because we literally, there was nothing out there. It was super frustrating. I had this vision of what we wanted to deliver, what we needed to deliver. And down every single road I went, I'm like, geez, this is going to be more and more legacy. This is more and more legacy. This is more and more legacy, kind of looking pretty much like the current stacks that are out there. So it was a bit of good timing and then a bit of risk management, I guess, that ultimately worked out and paid off.
Yeah, and it's fascinating actually because we forget that you mentioned it's a 30-year-old industry. So there are pieces of software in these companies that are literally 30 years old. I mean, it's insane
100%.
to think that
100%.
Yeah, and then you get inefficiencies, you get expensive software, you get bloated stuff, and then all of a sudden you need an organization of thousands of people just to make sure that everything operates.
100%.
Like,
And that
stuff connects to
integration
each other.
overhead, right? That
it's
integration
enormous.
overhead of taking a 30-year-old system and integrating it into, a
A new
one-year-old system that
5G
is
system,
super, exactly, super API driven, cloud-based, cloud native, all of this stuff. And you've got AS400 in the background there, trying to compete against the cloud. It is mad.
Yeah, and then from a consumer perspective, I mean, I'm with a big red operator, and I was so frustrated lately because they just canceled their data app, and now I have to use a payments app and load my credit card onto a payments app because they want to onboard me into their new payment rail system. And I'm like, that's not what I signed up for. I just want to buy data. Like, what are you doing? So, what do you think of, like, I mean, it seems these network operators have lost interest in being network operators and they want to expand into becoming banks and do other things. Like,
Exactly.
is that the play for operators to go that direction because the market is getting saturated on the network side?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got an interesting view on this, and it might, I think I've got an interesting view. So my view is the operators need to embrace MVNOs more. Okay. And I think, look, and they need to be embraced in a positive way. And also, so two things. One thing you don't want is a market where the price drops to where the MNOs, the telcos, can't maintain their network, right? The last thing any of us want is a network where all our calls are dropped, the data's terrible, you're not on the latest 5G technology because they don't have the money to upgrade, etc. So the first thing I'll say is you want strong mobile operators. So there's no way I'm advocating for, the operators need to drop all their prices, all that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. You need to have the right price that they can still maintain their network, still provide great customer service, etc. But on the flip side, I do believe that there's a large percentage of customers which they cannot service efficiently. And that's where the MVNOs need to step in, right? So in my view, they need to step back and be more and more network and infrastructure providers and less and less customer service focused, and leave that up for the MVNOs, etc., who can provide product and services at a much lower cost than what an MNO traditionally can do. Right. So I hate the whole super app thing. I think a super app is just a fad. It doesn't make any sense because, I'm with one of the banks who love the super app idea. And, one of the most fascinating things about the super app is they've got a panic button in there, but you have to log in to hit your panic button. Like, oh my gosh. I'm in the middle of dying.
Navigate 5 screens. You have to go through.
Yeah.
Where's that thing again?
Like to book a flight. The app's not built for booking flights, right?
No, it's
I want an app that was built for booking flights, to book my flights. I want an app that was built for telco to book or to use for my telco experience. So I have a very different view on super apps. And yes, the mobile operators are going to the super app view. I don't agree with it. I don't think it makes any sense. And I think you just water down your offering so much that it doesn't make sense. I think there's smarter ways to do it. And that's not the way, in my view.
Well, suppose when you run out of ideas of how to innovate on the customer packages side, you go, well, there's nothing left here. We need to go into different verticals.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. But have they actually done the necessary innovation, right? I mean, it's not that, I mean, there are so many telcos around the world who've done incredible things. I think I don't want to say it, but it's almost like it's too much hard work, right? We're making money in a certain way. Let's not change that. Let's look at additional revenue streams versus saying, well, do we need to have, is the status quo right? Do we need to go, like Elon Musk, first principle thinking, it's the reason he's been successful. Now, I think most people don't apply first principle thinking to everything we do. Like, why are we doing it this way? I don't know, because everyone else has been doing it. So, well, that's a terrible reason to be doing it. Go back, step back and say, does it still make sense 30 years down the road? Oh, well, it still does. Great. Let's carry on doing it. Or no, absolutely not. Let's do something else. So I think that's where a lot of the challenges lie, is that no one actually goes back to why are we doing this in the first place?
Yeah, I must say it's reminding me of where the insurance companies have actually gone. If you think of your Nakeds, your Pineapples, and all these interesting names that have come out there, it's like they're underwritten by a bigger company, but then they focus on their niche, they focus on their customer centricity. Their differentiator is their interactions with customers and understanding them better and niching down on that. And it sounds like 100%. You're going down that same road.
100%. If you look internationally, there are quite a few digital network operators, which is kind of probably the more relevant name than our MVNO for us. Well, we're a digital MVNO. And a lot of big brands have done that, right? So in the States, Verizon have got a brand called Visible. In Poland, Orange have got a brand called Flex. But there are lots of examples like this where they've gone and said, look, we need to disrupt internally. So they spin up a completely separate brand, takes product stuff from the mothership, but then ultimately delivers it differently, different cultures, different route to markets. And I think that's the way that these things need to be looked at.
Calvin, there's been a lot of talk recently internationally about, Starlink and what that's going to do. I'd like to, you've been in the mobile operator space for a very long time. Like, what do you think about Starlink? Is the long-term play we're not going to have cell phone towers anymore? How's it going to play out in South Africa? How should it play out? Because also, a lot of people have invested, and we've got a lot of people that have shares in these companies that have infrastructure. You don't just want to go and, bring in a technology that's going to make all of that irrelevant, specifically international player. On the other hand, we don't want to be trailing from a technology perspective and not embrace something that could be, very helpful for the end consumer.
I personally believe that Starlink's an and not an or. So I think that you're still going to have the mobile networks plus Starlink. I think it makes perfect sense. I think it'll bring down the cost. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the cost of data in South Africa, right? South Africa is a complex place. It's massive, and by law, the operators have to cover at least 96% of the country. Now, understand, South Africa is absolutely massive with a relatively small population. If you take
and population is quite concentrated in the metros, like this.
Absolutely, so it's an expensive place to roll out. So it's why I say it's an and, because if the operators can say, well, listen, instead of putting up towers in, rural wherever,
Northern Cape,
KZN, wherever, Northern Cape, let's utilize Starlink in those remote centers or drop down the cost, right? So I think for me, it's how to utilize both technology. I mean, look, it's low orbit. It's primarily used for data. The voice side, from what I've heard, I've never tested it, is not amazing because of the latency, which is understandable. I mean, that's always one of the things with satellite is the high latency. And yes, it's low orbit, so the latency is significantly lower, but not low enough for voice really. But, I think most of our lives these days are pretty much data consumption anyway, so not the end of the world. But I genuinely believe that the operators need to embrace Starlink. And when there's multiple guys, Starlink's obviously the most popular one. But I think the challenge that you've got in South Africa, a lot of people complaining about the fact that, why isn't it in South Africa? And the cars are blocking it, all these kind of things. It's a fine line, and it's something that I think it needs to be considered carefully, because you don't want all that revenue going straight out of South Africa, right?
No, exactly.
In South Africa, it's a 200 billion rand industry. Now, if we don't license it carefully, you're going to have 50% to that, 30% to that revenue flowing straight out of South Africa, right? Without any sort of any benefit to local South Africans, which I think is wrong. So, it's a lazy argument to say, the government's just trying to make tons of money. It certainly is the case, but it also makes sense for South Africa. We've got to try and keep revenue in South Africa and better our own infrastructure, right? Because we're going to better the infrastructure for the rest of the world. And then we sit with a third grade infrastructure at 3 times the price, and then we're complaining about it.
And dependence.
And dependence, exactly. So as I say, for me, it's a very strong match. I think Starlink has a place, and I think it must be utilized. I don't think it's one or the other. And it's got to be used side by side. And it's a best of breed per use case, and that's where it'll be utilized. Like when 6G comes out and you download a gig a second, etc., which you can already do on 5G, but you're never going to get that off Starlink, right? So it's a horses for courses scenario for me.
It's also, you mentioned, government, people thinking that government just wants to make money, but people tend to forget that their mothers and grandmothers have, shares in Vodacom and MTN without them even knowing it. And the returns those companies make actually pay for their retirement. So if you just rip the carpet out of this thing and go, cool, now just open it up. There's some serious financial consequences to all of it.
Massive.
So,
it's like this discussion around net neutrality, right? Where the guys and a lot of the networks are saying, well, not net neutrality, where basically they're saying social media giants should be paying the operators for use of their network. For me, it's such a circular discussion, because without those social media companies, you wouldn't have the high data utilization that you've got on those networks. So it's completely circular. So I think it's a lazy discussion once again from the networks, where they're trying to just increase their monetization. And this is one of our big bugbears, is that telcos have the most incredible data, right? It's, and for obvious reasons, you need to have that. So it's that data is, and could be as rich as any of the social media stuff. It's just not utilized and not monetized. Now, that's a failure in the telco industry. That's not sure. There's no other reason, right? So if the telcos are to say, geez, look at how, the social media companies are monetizing their data. How can we monetize that data? And that's an entire different business case. And for me, those are the kind of business cases and use cases they should be trying to monetize versus trying to do super apps and various other things.
But it's fascinating though, because it comes back to the point of the kind of company you're building, right? So if you have a CEO that's strong on the network side, right, his background is there, he's going to, from a culture perspective, interest, projects he's passionate about or she's passionate about, it's going to be all around, network, make the network the best one it could be. If you have someone that's customer focused, obviously it's that side. It's very seldom that you find like a Elon Musk kind of person that is really interested in a network because he's highly technical, he's very interested in the customer experience because he finds that fascinating. And then, now you're throwing data into the mix. So you're going like, you need a unicorn there to actually run all of us. But breaking them down into silos and going, well, I'm passionate about customer experience and data. Now you can build a really cool business because you can get customers to love it, but you can also build the data. And I think that's really, beyond what we're talking about today. I think in other business verticals, the exact same opportunity exists.
Totally. Absolutely. There's no question. This is certainly not unique to telco by any stretch of the imagination. Your examples of Naked and Pineapple are the perfect examples where that's already happening in another industry, but there are lots of other industries that need disruption.
So I'd like to start diving into a bit of your go-to-market strategy, because like I confessed, I was doing a bit of stalking before today's episode. And you called yourselves one of South Africa's best kept secrets. And now you've got a billboard strategy that seems to be really taking off. Can you just tell us about getting all that legal stuff, all this mess that you were talking about, this legacy stuff? Now you can actually hit the road running. It seems like you've got that out of the way. Now it's go to market. Can you just tell us about your strategies around that?
Yeah. So when we launched in May last year, we were very clear that, we had this vision of what the customer wanted and how it should work. And, we launched, and the uptake was slow. It was all done on digital and social only. But that was done on purpose, right? We wanted to make sure that the uptake was slow, that we could learn. So what did the customers want? What did the customers not want? One of the things, that we introduced was, build your own plan, which is in our mind still a fantastic product. And I think in the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to see a complete flip in terms of the usage of build your own plan. But what we realized in the sort of lead up to the billboard campaign was that customers didn't know what they needed. So we were giving them all the flexibility to build whatever you want. They're like, well, but I don't know what I want. right?
Oh,
So
no.
we
Yeah.
had to
Oh,
go
no.
back and, start to give them packages that they could choose that made sense. And okay, cool, I can get that, right? So, just sorting out the app, making sure, where the friction points, what are the things that the customers don't like about the app? What is the things the customers do like about the app? So the first 13, 14 months really was just about friction, customer journey, price and proposition, and sorting all of those things out. And then we were like, all right, cool. We've got all of that right. The sign-up journey slick, the Rika slick, eSIM journey slick. Let's now go and push this thing above the line. So we then needed to launch billboards. Now, the challenge is how do you go? I mean, we don't have an endless marketing budget, not like the telcos, right? To the mobile. So how do you go and build a marketing campaign that cuts through the clutter one, but then also lands the message of what we're trying to deliver?
Mhm.
So, one of the things that I see that we all see, right? It's all these adverts. We've got the best network. No, we've got the best network. We've got the best customer service. No, we've got the best customer service. And that's across all industries, but telco's probably one of the worst. So, we came up with this idea of a 14-day free trial. We see it all the time in the app space, right? So not quite sure about the app. Let's try it, test it. And if I like it, I carry on. And we thought, well, why not apply that to telco? Never been done, but I don't understand why. So we came up with the concept of a 14-day free trial. So instead of us telling you that we've got the best network, you go and test it. Instead of telling us we've got the best customer experience, you go and test it. Instead of telling us that we're customizable and simple and we've got great propositions, you go and test it. So that was the thinking behind the campaign. And that was, how do we actually get this campaign, take off and get the eyeballs and the takeoff that we required versus just putting it on 50 billboards, right? So I really pushed my creative team and I said, guys, you're not going to come to me with a traditional billboard campaign. Like, I'm going to shoot all of them down. And we did. It took us a lot longer because I didn't like most of them. But this one, when it landed, I mean, our chief marketing officer kept it a secret for a while. And, she came and said, this is the one. And the second I saw it, I was like, I got it. I love it. And it's done exceptionally well. I mean, today it's 2 weeks into the campaign. It feels like 2 months, to be honest, but it's done exceptionally well. And it's done exactly what we wanted. Cut through the clutter, take us from total obscurity to people talking about us. And now we just got to keep that momentum going.
I have to just touch on, so the campaigns are fantastic. I mean, the Fufsies is good. And I haven't seen the Rusty one, but I don't need to go out and drive around and start spotting these. But you touched on a point that me and Renee have been talking a lot about lately, which is trying to understand your customer, right? So, I think also we don't realize what we don't know as a consumer, right? In these telcos, we're so used to this traditional, boring, this is what you get, that's it, right?
Totally.
Without diving into the super app place. But Renee really believes in what you said, which is that the consumers don't actually know what they want. And so how did you navigate that to start building the apps and everything that spoke to them?
I mean, look, you've got to start with what you think the consumer wants, right? And that's at the end goal. I mean, at the end of the road. But once we started, and the only way to do is get customer feedback, right? And it's been frustrating, to be honest, because we're like, why don't the consumers understand that they're going down a path, they're paying way too much, they don't understand the customer service, etc. But it's comfortable in what they've used to, and they've done it for 30 years. So it's why that 13 to 14 months was so important for us, because we took that as pure learnings. So every single time we got feedback, we're like, does it make sense? Does it apply? Does it fit into the strategy? Yes, it does. Great. No, it doesn't. That's a once-off. It's one user who thinks that, just discard it. And then we're also pretty stubborn about certain things in terms of saying, like, we also understand human behavior, and we weren't going to change the things for what we knew was going to work, right? So, and I will say, going back to first principle, every single thing we've done is deliberate. So, we started, our slogan was the untelco telco. And I used to say to the guys, if they bring me anything and they ever say, and I ask the question, why are we doing it this way? And they say, it's because what other telcos and what's always been done, I'm going to immediately shoot the idea down, because it means you haven't applied your mind and you haven't gone back to first principle and say, does it even make sense if you're doing these things? So I think That's such a key thing, is going back and understanding why you're doing it, but then just got to listen to the customers, right? I find this an interesting part about listening to customers, though. It's a fine line. So, obviously the billboard campaign, our social media commentary has gone through the roof, but you've got to realize the number of trolls out there as well, right? You've got nothing better than to just troll your page and just cause nonsense, right? And like, most stupid comments, and my social media team gets so frustrated. They just want to respond to everything. I'm like, there's certain things you've just got to leave, right? Where it's just humans who just can't help themselves. Something that looks positive and they don't want to see positive today. So they just got to comment something negative. So you've got to be careful with what comment you do take back from a customer. But overall, if you listen to customers properly, you do get great feedback.
Yeah, I must say this free subscribe is a 14-day trial, right? I think it is. Yeah.
14.
I mean, that's very innovative in the space. I mean, we try and do that. So product manager by profession, and those are the kinds of things that we do to hook a user in. And I would never have thought I would see that in a telco company. That's quite innovative. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, listen, but once again, we try to go after customers who are used to this kind of thing. So how am I going to hook a customer in? A 14-day free trial is pretty standard in the Netflix environment, Showmax, and various other things. So why is it so different here? Because no one's willing to take the risk, right? And sure, we've got lots of guardrails up here because we're in an industry where a freebie is the name of the game, and they absolutely love a freebie in the space. So we had to put a lot of guardrails and make sure that we were cautious from a fraud perspective and various other things. But that comes with the territory, and so you've got to play the game.
So I have to ask the question on funding, because this sounds like a monumentous project that you took on. I mean, I know this is not your first rodeo, but I mean, from tackling your big telcos to building a mobile app, I mean, some startups just struggle to get that out the door. So can you just tell us how you got your funding to get off the ground, and just some insights there as well?
Yeah, look, I will say funding is probably the hardest thing I've done in this business to date. Because I started this business with my own funding at the very early stages. I went to see about 70 different funders. So from VCs to private equity to family offices to high net worth individuals, came with all sorts of harebrained schemes as how I was going to raise the money, right? But the one thing I was also pretty clear on is how much money I required up front. So I'd done the business case. I knew exactly what I required, and mistakes I've made in the past is lying to myself about how much is required. So, I know I need this much, but I'm sure I can do it for half that. No, you can't. It's probably going to be double that, but it's definitely going to be half, right? So, I always say literally 70 different funders. And the hardest part about that, and why I say it was hard, is that it's like going on 70 different dates. And not one of those, you think it's the one after every single one. And I think the hard thing for me was that no one ever turned me down. I said, no, I think I had 6 people turn me down in the 70, right? And once I did get funding, I went back to the guys I really, really thought loved the project. And they were like, listen, we'll never turn you down because we want to be able to come back to you in further funding rounds. So we'll rather just stay neutral, which is quite harsh because at the time, you're like, but just why? They're not ghosting me. They're not talking to me. What's going on? But it ended up being quite a cool story. So the final funder that I got, which was a high net worth individual out of Cape Town, it was an introduction from a completely unlikely source. Kind of did the intro. Sure, I'll meet up with you 2 weeks time in Cape Town. I was literally halfway there and I get a WhatsApp. Sorry, I can't make it today. I was like, oh, they're just 10 times. All right, fine. Turn around. About a month later, get a WhatsApp. Cool. Would you like to meet? Sure. Set it up 2 weeks later. Halfway there. Sorry, I can't make it. I'm like, oh, jeez, writing this guy off. Anyway, about 6 weeks after that, I get a WhatsApp. Cool. Would you like to meet? Cool. But I'll come to your side this time. All right, fine. And probably 10 minutes before the meeting, I got this WhatsApp. I'm like, oh, not again. And he said, listen, can I land my chopper on the soccer field around here? And I was like, okay, we can do that.
Oh my God.
So
love it.
It was a 1 hour meeting that turned into 6 hours. And the rest is history, right? So it's kind of perseverance. So I was ready to give up on the guy, but it actually turned out to be the original funder. And then subsequently, then I've got a very strong family office that have invested post.
Yeah, I'd love to also just quickly before we start wrapping up is understanding margins, because I know pricing is very competitive. And when you've got such a big funder, they need to start seeing how the numbers are going to be returning at some point. So, I mean, how are you navigating that? I mean, the unit economics of doing all of this work.
Look, I think the first thing is if you're going to disrupt an industry or go into an industry, make sure it's big enough, right? So in South Africa, telco is a 200 billion rand industry. So that ticks the box and big enough. You know, we want 1% of this market, which if we can get that right, you know, we absolutely winning. And, you know, it's $500 million business. I mean, a 2 billion rand business. We want half. If we get half of that, we're winning. All right. So it's then focusing on who is your customer base, because what you can do, and what we've seen a lot of MVNOs, is they want the entire country, right? We don't want that. We know exactly which customers we're looking for and how we're going to do that. Now, that then helps with the unit economics, because once you're going after a customer base that you understand, you can price specific to that market, make sure you've got nice high margins, because to your point, if you don't have high margins in this industry, you're going to burn. And then focus on that. But it's focus, right? And it's so easy to get sidetracked. I mean, the amount of guys that catch, geez, I've got this opportunity. They've got 6,000 distribution points. And I'm like, it's not my customer segment. Can't go there. And so you've got to be very, very specific about it, because, you know, to compete in the various markets, the various margins that come there. So one is a very high volume base, but pretty low margins. One much higher volume, but very low volumes. We're right in the middle, right? Where we've got decent volumes and decent margins. And that's the place I want to play. And we very specific about it. So yeah, I think that's the only way. So, you know, in a 200 billion rand industry, there, you can certainly choose what market segment you want to go after and then focus on it very carefully.
Why would you say Cell C failed?
My view is, one is the size of the capex required to implement that network, right? I think was underestimated in South Africa. And I think, so that would definitely be one. Two is the fact that we're trying to go after all and sundry, versus focusing on a target segment. So, you know, I mean, I think Cell C started a lot of interesting concepts like, you know, port to us for 10,000 rand and you get a phone and these kind of things. That was super poorly managed in the background. So, you know, a lot of guys got the phone and they never actually did the porting and those kind of small little things. But for me, it's not that was the challenge. It's the fact that you're not focusing on a segment. You know, you're a new entrant, go and own that segment first. Once you own that segment, then you can start to look at the other segment. But to try and come in and own South Africa, just because you've got a license to do that, I think is mad. You know, you're trying to replicate, you know, prior to that, I don't know how long it was, but 10 to 12 years, the guys have built a stronghold and were pumping lots of cash. They were sitting on lots of money and had the ability to have better networks. And, you know, it's easy in hindsight to say that, but I think what Cell C have done now is just smart, right? They're super MVNO on the back of MTN and a little bit of back of Vodacom. So I think they've got a really great chance of success now. And I think with the current management team, I think they're going to focus on specific customer segments and not, you know, sort of spray and pray. So I think they've got a good chance of success this time around. I really do.
Okay.
But it's interesting going, because back in the day when Cell C launched, like network, I mean, there weren't a lot of options, right? It was Vodacom or MTN. And network quality really was the differentiator. Like you went places you didn't get signal. So I was on Cell C and I'm like, just got so frustrated because I go places and I don't have signal.
Exactly.
And I think that was probably the issue. Is like they couldn't compete on the capital expenditure required to get at a network
100%.
of that level. And then market traction didn't go fast enough to actually finance more towers going up.
Exactly right. You know, I mean, they should have done a roaming deal up front. That should have been their strategy, right? And I was under the impression they did or didn't. I'm not 100% sure, but that should have been strategy number one. So you can enter the market.
But the switch between the towers never worked well. So I was on Vodacom sometimes, and after a while, I'm like, just switch off this Cell C towers. Let me just run on Vodacom. So, and then you ask the question, well, if it's the same price, might as well just go to Vodacom and be sure it works. So
exactly.
Mm. Really, any last questions before we go to the unexpected lightning round? Calvin doesn't know it's coming.
Yeah. So Calvin, maybe just something interesting. You mentioned your target customers you're going after specifically. Like, can you maybe share a bit about that? What is that customer? Who is it? Where does one find them?
So I think if we take a few steps back, right? Currently there are two product sets out there. It's contract or postpaid, and there's prepaid. Those are the kind of products out there. So, if you're on the high end, you're going to go off for a contract or postpaid, as we call it. And then if you're on the low end, you're going for prepaid. But what about the guy in the middle class? What does he want, right? And that's where we started. It was like, what does the middle class guy want? Well, he wants a combination of both. He doesn't want prepaid, but he doesn't really maybe doesn't have the credit rating or the money for the contract. So how do we find this middle ground for the guy that's actually looking for that kind of product set? And that's why, what we built, and we call ourselves the Netflix for telco, right? Where it's a month-to-month product that, you enter your credit card and then you change your product as and when you go, or you can stay to the same product. So to answer your question, it's 18 to 45-year-old, digital and tech savvy, middle class, sort of earning 10,000 Rand plus, and with a smartphone and a debit or credit card. That's our target market, right? So it's not, do we want the high end? Sure. I'm not going to stop the high end, but it's not a target market. MTN and Vodacom have pretty much got that market tapped, and I think it's going to be hard for us to enter that market. I don't want the very bottom end. So I don't want mass market. I think there are lots and lots of players in the mass market, so don't want that. So we're going very much middle class segment, guys who are cost conscious. I always find this interesting. You're right at the top. Cost isn't a factor. It's all about service and reliability, right? On the bottom end, service and reliability are less important. It's all about cost. We go after the middle class, which is cost is important, but service is just as important. And I think we've got the ability, well, not ability, we can do both extremely well, and we are doing both extremely well.
Yeah, and I think also, if I can add to that, times have changed, right? So, I'm looking at Vodacom going, hey, can you do a 36-month contract? Geez, that's a very long time to commit to this kind of setup. By then we've got 6G rolled out, different requirements, phones work differently. I don't know if your 5 gig a month is going to work for me 24 months from now. So I think that change in technology and how fast it's moving, together with, I don't feel like buying a new iPhone because my iPhone is still fine. So I don't need to upgrade and get a new phone. I just want, I can just get it. I think a lot of that's also playing into it, which is very interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's no question.
All right. Does that mean lightning round? Let's go. All right, Calvin, to the lightning round, we ask a few questions. You have to think of the first thing that comes to your mind, and then you just give us that answer. All right. You ready? So the first one is normally quite easy, is just a book recommendation that you feel a founder, or something that you've read that you feel a founder should read.
So the one I love is, it's by Yuri Levine. I'm trying to get the wording right, but don't focus on the solution, focus on the problem. Such a great book. I promise you, it's a founder's handbook. If you want to do a startup, you have to read that book.
Nice. Then what advice have you received in your career that you feel the founder should also you want to part ways, to the next founder? Piece of advice.
I think is don't listen to people too much in the initial stages. And in fact, probably throughout these stages, if you've got a good idea, and I think it's not just a good idea, it's a vision that you can clearly articulate and you can see the end goal, just back yourself and move on, and don't tell too many people about it, because what you end up doing is getting a hell of a lot of negative feedback, and you start to question yourself. So that was one of the things that I was taught along the way, is just try and, if you've got the vision and you believe it, just back yourself and go. Don't listen to all the naysayers, because there are thousands.
Love it. Do you have a daily habit that you feel contributes to your success?
So I start off my day with gym or exercise. So it's either a walk or gym every single day. And if I don't do that, I just don't start my day right. And I must admit, I love if I can walk in a place where I can walk. It's an hour podcast at the same time. So it's a walk plus a podcast. And I really love that.
Fantastic. You've got a new podcast to start listening to, just saying.
Thank you.
So every day when you start at Melon, what is the metric that you look at first or ask your team to tell you about?
Customer numbers.
Downloads.
Customer numbers.
Yeah.
Well, not downloads, monthly actives, so people actually subscribe, because downloads are vanity metric, not an actual metric. But yeah, we're in that stage of growth, right? Where it's so every single thing we do, I'm like, it's just attribution of these, everything we do, like put up the billboards, what did that do? We did a PR release, what did that do? Just trying to understand what moves the needle and what doesn't. I'm trying to do more of and less of.
And then the last one, before we let you go, another founder or person in the industry that we should have on our podcast or bring into our community.
Have you ever chatted to Nick Dreyer from Telco?
He's a friend of Renee's. Are you on mute, Renee?
I haven't actually. I think that'd be cool.
I personally think you should get on. He's got the best energy. I love their story. It's like the best South African story. They're great guys. So him and Ross started it. But Nick does most of the podcasts. I would really recommend him coming on board. He's so great.
Nice. And with that, Calvin, thank you very much. It's been a great honor having you here, hearing your story, giving us your insights. Renee, any last goodbyes?
No, I thought it was a very interesting chat. I learned a few things about mobile networks and looking forward to see where Melon's going.
Cool. Shot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.